People think heartbreak comes with shouting, tears, and dramatic goodbyes. But the truth is, the worst heartbreaks are often silent. They happen in a single sentence, a single look, a single moment that quietly destroys the future you thought you were building. A few years ago, I came across a story that stayed with me. It wasn't about revenge in the usual sense. There were no screaming matches, no public humiliation, no dirty tricks. It was about a man who lost everything and decided that the only way to answer betrayal was to become the kind of person his ex believed he could never be. His name was Daniel. Daniel was 27 years old and lived a very ordinary life. He worked in a small electronics repair shop, fixing broken phones and laptops. The pay wasn't great, but he was dependable, honest, the kind of person who always kept his promises. For 4 years, he had been dating a woman named Melissa. They had dreams together, a little house in the suburbs, a dog, maybe children one day. Daniel believed they were building that future one careful step at a time. Melissa wasn't so sure anymore. She had recently started working at a large marketing company. Her coworkers drove expensive cars and talked about promotions, investments, and luxury holidays. Slowly, she began comparing Daniel to the people around her. He didn't notice it at first. The little comments. "You should be making more money by now. Don't you think it's time to stop playing it safe? My friend's husband just bought her a new BMW." Daniel would laugh and say, "Give me a little more time. I'm studying programming after work. I'm trying to build something better." And he was. Every night after a 10-hour shift, he came home, opened his old laptop, and spent 2 or 3 hours teaching himself software development through free online courses. It was exhausting, but he believed it would pay off one day. One Friday evening, Daniel finished work early. He bought Melissa her favorite flowers and stopped at a jewelry store to pick up a simple silver necklace he'd been saving for. He wasn't planning to propose. Not yet. He just wanted to remind her that even if he wasn't rich, she mattered to him. He reached her apartment around 7. The lights were on. Music was playing. He smiled to himself. Then he opened the door, and everything changed. Melissa was sitting on the couch. Next to her was another man. They weren't trying to hide anything. In fact, when Daniel walked in, neither of them even stood up. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Daniel looked at the flowers in his hand, then at Melissa, then at the stranger. Finally, he whispered, "What's going on?" Melissa folded her arms. "I was going to tell you eventually." The stranger stood up and casually put his hand on her shoulder. Daniel felt like the room had started spinning. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Melissa took a deep breath and said the words he would remember for years. "Daniel, I need someone with ambition. Someone who's actually going somewhere in life." He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had spent 4 years supporting her, encouraging her, believing in her dreams. And now she was looking at him as if he were a complete failure. The other man smiled awkwardly and said, "Look, man, no offense, but fixing phones forever isn't exactly a future." Daniel stared at him. He wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that he was studying every night, that he had plans, that success takes time. But then he looked at Melissa. She wasn't defending him. She wasn't even looking guilty. She had already made her decision. Quietly, Daniel placed the necklace on the kitchen counter. The flowers slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. Without another word, he turned around and walked out. The drive home felt endless. He didn't cry. He didn't call his friends. He didn't even play music. He just kept hearing the same sentence in his head. Someone who's actually going somewhere. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the old laptop on his desk. The programming course he had been working through was still open. For nearly an hour, he simply looked at the screen. Then he grabbed a piece of paper and wrote 5 promises to himself. Number 1, I will not beg anyone to stay. Number 2, I will improve myself every single day. Number 3, I will not waste energy on hatred. Number 4, I will build the future I wanted, even if I build it alone. And finally, number 5, one day I will be grateful this happened. When he read that last line back, he almost laughed at himself. Grateful? How could anyone be grateful for betrayal? How could anyone be thankful after losing the person they thought they would marry? But he left the paper on the wall anyway. The first few months were the hardest of his life. Every morning he woke up wanting to message Melissa. Every evening he wondered where she was, who she was with, whether she ever thought about him. Sometimes he would open social media and search for her profile. Then he would remember promise number 3. He would close the app and force himself back to work. Little by little, his life started changing. He stopped eating junk food and joined a cheap local gym. He replaced late-night overthinking with late-night studying. He saved every extra dollar instead of spending it trying to impress people. His coworkers noticed the difference. "You've changed," one of them told him. Daniel smiled. "No," he replied. "I just stopped waiting for someone else to believe in me." Almost a year passed. One Monday morning, while he was fixing a cracked laptop screen at work, his phone buzzed. It was an email. A small software company had seen his online portfolio and wanted to interview him for a junior developer position. Daniel read the email 3 times before he believed it was real. The interview was 2 weeks later. He spent every spare minute preparing. Coding questions, mock interviews, practice projects. The night before the interview, he looked up at the old list still taped to the wall. 4 promises had already come true, but the 5th one day, I will be grateful this happened. He still wasn't sure. He still wasn't over the pain. He still remembered Melissa's words. But as he put on his only suit and looked in the mirror the next morning, something unexpected happened. For the first time since the breakup, he realized he wasn't doing this to prove her wrong anymore. He was doing it to prove himself right. And what Daniel didn't know was that the biggest surprise of his life was waiting just around the corner. Because only a few months after landing that interview, fate would arrange a reunion with Melissa that neither of them could have imagined. And when she saw the man he had become, the look on her face would say everything that words never could. People love to talk about success. They celebrate the promotions, the new houses, the dream vacations, and the smiling photographs posted online. But almost nobody talks about the ugly part, the lonely mornings, the weekends spent working while everyone else is out having fun, the moments when you wonder if all the sacrifice is even worth it. Transformation is rarely dramatic. Most of the time, it looks like one exhausted person choosing not to give up. That was Daniel's life. The interview with the software company had gone better than he expected, but he didn't want to get his hopes up. He had been disappointed before. He knew life didn't hand out rewards just because you had suffered. So he did the only thing he could do. He went back to work. Back to the repair shop. Back to his late-night coding lessons. Back to the little apartment that still felt too quiet. 3 days later, while replacing the battery in an old laptop, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. "Hello, is this Daniel Carter?" Yes? This is Amanda from Horizon Tech. We'd like to offer you the position of junior software developer. For a second, he thought he had heard wrong. He looked around the repair shop, at the cracked screens stacked on the shelves and the old workbench where he had spent the last 6 years. Are you serious? He asked. The woman on the other end laughed softly. Very serious. Welcome to the team. When the call ended, Daniel didn't celebrate. He didn't jump up and down or call everyone he knew. He simply sat there, staring at the wall. Then, for the first time since the breakup, he allowed himself to cry. Not because he missed Melissa, but because he realized he had survived. The words she had used to destroy him had accidentally rebuilt him. His new job was harder than he imagined. He was surrounded by people who had university degrees and years of experience. During the first month, he felt completely out of place. More than once, he thought about quitting. One evening, after making a mistake that delayed a project, he stayed back alone in the office fixing his code. His manager, an older developer named Victor, walked over and asked, "Why are you still here?" Daniel shrugged. "I'm trying to catch up with everyone else." Victor looked at the screen, then back at Daniel. "You know," he said, "skills can be taught. Discipline can't. Most people leave the office exactly at 5. You're still here because you want a better future." Then he smiled.
People like you usually do pretty well.
Those words stayed with Daniel. Nobody had ever described him that way before. Not talented, not lucky, disciplined. And maybe that was enough. Months turned into years. Daniel's confidence grew. He earned promotions. He moved into a better apartment. He stopped buying the cheapest groceries and started treating himself to little things. A good cup of coffee, a weekend trip, a new watch after finishing a difficult project. But the biggest change wasn't in his bank account. It was in his mind. He no longer checked Melissa's social media. He no longer imagined conversations where he proved her wrong. In fact, there were entire weeks when he didn't think about her at all. And that's the strange thing about healing. It doesn't happen all at once. One day, you wake up and realize the person who once occupied your thoughts every hour hasn't crossed your mind in days. Then, life does what life always does. It gives you one final test. 3 years after the breakup, Horizon Tech sent Daniel to a business conference in the city. Hundreds of professionals from different companies filled the giant convention center. Daniel almost didn't go. He hated networking events. Too many fake smiles. Too many people pretending to be more successful than they really were. But Victor insisted. "You never know who you'll meet," he said. As it turned out, he was right. During the lunch break, Daniel was standing near the coffee station when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Daniel?" The cup in his hand froze halfway to his lips. Slowly, he turned around. It was Melissa. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She looked older, not in a bad way, just different. The confidence she once carried so easily seemed to have faded. Her eyes widened. "Wow," she said quietly. "You look different." Daniel smiled politely. "So do you." The conversation was awkward at first, the kind of small talk strangers make when they used to know everything about each other. She asked where he worked. He told her. She blinked. "Horizon Tech? You're a software developer now?" Daniel nodded. "I've been there for a while." Melissa looked genuinely surprised. "I didn't know you actually went through with it." He almost laughed. Actually went through with it. As if the countless sleepless nights, the studying, the sacrifices, had all been some temporary hobby. Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. "Daniel, there you are." It was Victor, walking toward them with 2 senior executives. He put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We've been looking for you. The clients loved your presentation this morning." One of the executives smiled and added, "I still think your automation system is going to save this company a fortune." Daniel thanked them politely. When they walked away, he turned back toward Melissa. She was staring at him. Not with love, not even with regret, but with the expression people wear when reality doesn't match the story they've been telling themselves. "You gave the keynote presentation?" she asked. "Just part of it." She looked down at the conference badge hanging around her neck. Then she looked back up. "I guess I underestimated you." Daniel could have said 100 things. He could have reminded her of the night she told him he had no future. He could have asked how the other guy was doing. He could have enjoyed the moment. Instead, he simply smiled. "You weren't the only one. I underestimated myself, too." For a second, Melissa looked like she wanted to say something else. Then she quietly asked, "Are you seeing anyone?" The question caught him by surprise. Daniel thought about it. About the old version of himself who would have taken that as a sign of hope, who would have believed this was the moment he had been waiting for. But that man didn't exist anymore. He had disappeared somewhere between the long nights of studying and the early mornings of self-discipline. Daniel answered honestly, "Not right now. I've just been focused on building a good life." Melissa nodded slowly. "You always deserved that." An announcement echoed through the convention center, calling everyone back to the main hall. People began moving toward the doors. Melissa hesitated. "I know this probably doesn't matter anymore," she said quietly, "but I'm sorry." Daniel looked at her, and to his own surprise, he realized he believed her. She wasn't apologizing because he had become successful. She was apologizing because time had taught her what she had lost. But something else had changed too. Daniel no longer needed that apology. He had spent years imagining this exact moment, wondering what he would say, wondering if hearing "I'm sorry" would somehow erase the pain. It didn't, because healing had already done that.
He smiled kindly and said, "I hope things work out for you, Melissa." Then he walked away. No anger, no revenge speech, no dramatic final words. Just a quiet goodbye. As Daniel entered the conference hall, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Victor. "Don't disappear after the event. The investors want to meet the guy who designed the project." Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket and couldn't help but smile. Years ago, he had wanted Melissa to see him succeed. Now, success was simply his life. But fate wasn't quite finished with him yet, because later that evening, while talking with the investors at the company dinner, he would meet someone who would completely change the way he thought about love, loss, and second chances. And for the first time in years, his future wouldn't be defined by the person who left. It would be shaped by the person who stayed. People think revenge is about making someone cry, making them jealous, making them regret the choices they made. But sometimes, the greatest revenge is much quieter than that. Sometimes, it's simply becoming happy again. After the conference, Daniel stayed behind for the company dinner. The investors wanted to discuss the new project, and Victor insisted he join them. At first, it was all business. Conversations about software, deadlines, and future plans. But halfway through the evening, one of the investors introduced Daniel to his daughter, Emma. She was an architect who had recently returned from working overseas, and unlike most people at the event, she seemed completely uninterested in titles or job positions. Instead of asking Daniel how much money he made, she asked him what he enjoyed building. Instead of asking about promotions, she asked about the little notebook he carried everywhere. Daniel laughed and admitted that it was filled with ideas, goals, and half-finished app concepts. Emma smiled. "So you're one of those people who dreams on paper." They talked for almost an hour, about travel, about books, about the strange twists in life that push people toward the future they never expected. For the first time in years, Daniel forgot to think about the past. A week later, they met for coffee, then dinner, then long walks through the city where conversations seemed to flow without effort. There were no games, no pretending to be someone else, no feeling like he had to prove his worth. And that was when Daniel realized something important. A healthy relationship doesn't make you question your value. It reminds you that you always had it. Months passed. The project at Horizon Tech became a success, and Daniel was promoted to lead a small development team. He finally moved into the apartment he used to dream about during those lonely nights after the breakup. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a luxury penthouse. But every corner of it represented something he had earned. The bookshelves he built himself. The desk where he had spent hundreds of hours learning to code. The framed piece of paper hanging quietly above it. The same 5 promises he had written on the worst night of his life. He walked over and read them one by one. I will not beg anyone to stay. I will improve myself every day. I will not waste energy on hatred. I will build the future I wanted, even if I build it alone. Then he looked at the final line. One day, I will be grateful this happened. This time, he smiled, because somehow, against all odds, it had come true. Not because the pain had been easy, not because betrayal had been a gift, but because it had forced him to discover a version of himself he might never have met otherwise. A few weeks later, while cleaning out an old drawer, Daniel found the silver necklace he had bought from Melissa all those years ago, the one he had left behind on her kitchen counter. He had completely forgotten about it. Apparently, after she moved out, a mutual friend had collected a few of Daniel's belongings and returned them to him in a box. He held the necklace in his hand for a long moment. Then he closed the box and put it back on the shelf. Some memories don't need to be destroyed. They just don't need to be carried anymore. One evening, Daniel and Emma were sitting by the river, watching the sunset reflect across the water. Emma noticed he had gone quiet. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Daniel smiled to himself. "I was just thinking about how strange life is." "How so?" "If someone had told me 4 years ago that losing the person I loved would lead me here, I never would have believed them." Emma squeezed his hand gently. "And are you glad it did?" Daniel looked out across the water before answering. Then he said the one sentence that would have sounded impossible to his younger self. "Yeah, I think I am." Maybe that's the lesson hidden inside so many stories like this. The people who leave your life aren't always the villains. Sometimes they're just the chapter that ends before the story really begins. And success? Success isn't the expensive car. It isn't the promotion. It isn't watching someone regret losing you. Real success is waking up one day and realizing that the person who broke your heart no longer has the power to break your spirit. Because by then, you've built a life that's bigger than the pain they left behind. So if you're listening to this while going through your own heartbreak, if someone made you feel like you weren't enough, if they walked away and left you questioning your worth, don't waste your energy trying to get even. Don't waste years hoping they'll come back and apologize. Take that pain, take that disappointment, and turn it into fuel. Learn a new skill. Start that business. Take care of your health. Build the life you've always imagined. Because one day, you'll look back and realize something incredible. The breakup that almost destroyed you became the reason you discovered who you were meant to be. And by the time they finally see what you've become, you won't need revenge anymore. You'll already have everything you were searching for. If this story meant something to you, remember this simple truth. The best revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's becoming so happy, so strong, and so successful that you quietly thank them for letting you go.